Hey guys, what is up? Public back on another video, and today we're going to go over everything you need to know about the 9.0.5 changes coming for Shadow Priest. I'm going to talk about mostly priest-related things, although there are some kind of tangential changes I'll talk about and kind of what they mean for the spec. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so for this video, I'm not going to do anything super fancy. I'm just going to be kind of reading the changelog as we see it in the patch notes here. This is Wowhead's version of it just to get the kind of spell tooltips, but otherwise this is just the kind of vanilla straight changes. Now, so first things first, there were some optimizations and balancing done for Holy and Disc, which, if you're a Shadow Priest, you probably don't care too much, but if you do off-heal, these are kind of nice to see that they are paying attention a little bit to the balancing of the healers, so there you go. Now, to start us off here, most of these changes, guys, that we're going to talk about are, for the most part, just quality of life, kind of nice to have things. There aren't very many kind of major things that really impact what we're doing from Shadow's perspective, but there are a few kind of key things here. So, first things first, I know a lot of people were asking about this change and kind of what it meant. So, Master Shadow Weaving no longer benefits multiple times from damage amplifying effects. So, this is nothing to be concerned about, guys. There was actually a bug with Shadow Weaving specifically. If you guys don't know, this is actually our mastery, or the name of our mastery. Now, because of the way the ability was actually coded inside of the game, Shadow Weaving, for the most part, is just a passive thing tacked onto our spells, except for Shadow Fiend and Mindbender melee swings. So when they added the mastery benefit to those melee swings, what they actually did was there's actually like an extra damaging event in your spell damage. If you see in like details or your log, you have like a specific Shadow Weaving damage thing that's called out. That's actually just the melee swings of Shadow Fiend and Mindbender. However, there was a bug where that damage amplifying thing specifically was like snapshotting or doing some other weird stuff. We've never actually figured out what exactly was happening bug-wise, but, for sure on fights like Sludge Fist or Huntsman, there were some logs where that little tiny bit of Shadow Weaving mastery from just the melee swings of Shadow Fiend was your top damaging ability. It was very broken, super buggy. So predominantly all this is saying is they fixed that bug, which is good. So nothing crazy here. This does not affect like basically anything else other than that one little bug, which is good. Let's see. Shadowy Operations no longer cause targets to drop stealth if they deal no damage. PvP change. There you go. So Covenant abilities. Now, there really wasn't much here. They did make a change that did buff the Night Fae Guardians, which has been reverted, right? That is no longer in the game. However, they did leave the buff into the Guardian Fairy, which now grants a 20% damage reduction up from 10%. Now, this is fine. I don't know if this is going to convince healers or anyone else to go Night Fae if they haven't already, but this is a very nice quality of life change for sure. The Wrathful Fairy now probably grants resource to the Priest when there are multiple Wrathful Fairies on the target. Again, this is another bug fix that we had. If you had two Night Fae Shadow Priests in the same, or just Night Fae Priests in the raid, I guess I should say, only one of them would get the resources back from whatever target had the Wrathful Fairy on it at the time. So good to know that they fixed that. There was a few of you where you had double Shadow Priest in your raid were complaining that only one of you was getting the insanity. This should fix that. Mind Games no longer reverses damage or healing from itself when reflected. Guys, I'll be honest with you guys. I don't know what this change is. I'm assuming that it's just a spell reflect thing inside of PvP or other PvP mechanics that reflect like that. I don't know of a case in PvE where this is relevant. If I do, I'll put something in the comments below once I figure it out, but for now, don't worry about it. And then the Fae from Out of Conduct was buffed to leave it 80% effective copy of their benefit was 60% and can only be stacked on top of Fairy for double benefit. Again, guys, this conduit's pretty weak, generally speaking. There are some use cases you could argue for it inside of like Mythic Plus with Searing Nightmare and stuff like that, but for the most part, this is just not something you would consider using. Even with this buff, it's still pretty minimal. So there you go. Okay, so these are all the kind of generic priest class changes that I wanted to go over. So the rest of this stuff, we're going to have to scroll down a little bit here. They did buff the Fleshcraft ability, so if you guys are Necrolord, this is a very nice buff to that ability, although again, probably still inferior to Soul Shape. For the most part, they didn't really do any kind of soulbind balancing this patch, which is, kind of unfortunate, but, there it is. One thing I do want to call out, which is this is actually one of the main reasons I am Venthyr currently, is the Venthyr dungeon bonuses were both tweaked. I guess you could say overall maybe a buff. So the Loyal Stoneborn Halls of Atonement was the kind of how long it lasts was buffed up to 45 seconds. Unfortunately, they kneecapped its damage and cut it in half. unfortunately, which kind of stinks, although, you know, it was a little busted, so there you go. Kind of a little bit less needed to have a Venthyr in Halls of Atonement now, but still a nice thing to have. And then they also buffed the Anima cage in Sanguine Depths. They also moved one of the Anima cages, which I did not notice when I was testing stuff on PTR, so that'll be nice to see. So again, a nice thing to have if you are still sticking with Venthyr. Other things to think about here. So we have the Valor changes, which, you know, is kind of interesting. So you now have a little bit of an easier way to target things that you want inside of dungeons. So we'll talk about that and kind of what that means for Shadow in just a second. Before we get to that, I do want to kind of cover the big change in this patch, which is our legendary powers. So they actually buffed 2 of our legendary powers inside of this patch, Painbreaker Psalm and Shadow Flame Rift. So Painbreaker Psalm, unfortunately, even with this buff, is pretty terrible. It's not worth using, at least in a PvE environment. You know, they can buff this insanity all they want. Unfortunately, with the cooldown of Shadow Word Death and just the way that, you know, it works, having to have dots on the target to get that insanity, you're just not getting the bulk of the benefit. And again, it's effectively deleting your mastery from the target and causing you to redot more often. The playstyle is just really funky. Maybe it has some use cases in PvE, but generally, in PvP, but PvE, not something we're going to use. It needs to get redesigned, unfortunately. These small little buffs aren't going to do enough, in my opinion. Now, the big thing here is Shadow Flame Rift damage has been increased by 40%. Whoo boy, this is awesome. This is easily my favorite legendary that we had. We've just never used it because it hasn't been good. It does also now work with our mastery, which did change, I believe, before this patch. It just, no one noticed because no one was using the legendary. So with that change and the actual straight buff to the legendary, this guy is looking to be very, very strong, very, very competitive. From the early sims that we've been doing on PTR, it's not enough to take up Talbot Stratagem in single target. It's still about 1% or so behind single target wise. But once you get to the 2 to 5 target range, Shadow Flame Prism and Shadow Flame Rift is pumping damage. It's very, very big blaster. So definitely something that you guys are all going to want to craft if you play Shadow in any kind of PvE environment, in my opinion. Now, when you use it is going to be a little iffy. I'm going to do future videos specifically on that. But again, like I said, anytime you're kind of focusing on 2 to 5 target damage, this is where the legendary is really going to shine. Now, the key there is they do have to be somewhat relatively stacked. Not like, you know, very, very closely dense or anything, but spread target cleave is still probably going to favor something like Talbot, Psychic Link, whatever those things are, right? Auspicious Spirits, that kind of stuff. So definitely something to consider. Ideally, you're probably going to craft this guy on your helm, but if you have a great helm, you can craft on the gloves as well. Either one is fine. As far as fights that we're going to use it for in the raid, you're going to think of things, you know, like Huntsman maybe, Kael'thas is maybe an example. Stone Legion Generals is probably the perfect example of when you want to use this, just because there's so much 2 to 5 targets happening in that fight. Maybe Denathrius, I don't know, it kind of depends on what you want to optimize for on Denathrius. Again, Talbot is still going to be probably the choice there if you won't care about single target damage, but you have Shadow Flame Rift if you want something past that. As far as Mythic Plus damage goes, this one's going to be a little trickier because of the way Shadow Flame Rift works, which if you don't know, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death now cause your Shadow Fiend or Mindbender to teleport behind the target and then do an AoE, and it also extends the duration of them each time you cast that ability. So, because of the way we mostly AoE in dungeons is focused around Searing Nightmare, and mostly that and Mind Seer, we're not really casting Mind Blast or Shadow Word Death very, very much, except for like Dark Thought procs here and there. So because of that, there is still kind of the anti-synergy between Shadow Flame Prism and Searing Nightmare. However, there are dungeons like Theater of Pain, Spires of Ascension, where, you know, we typically run Misery already, maybe even Psychic Link with Talbotars if we're feeling crazy. So for those keys, running Shadow Flame Rift will probably be a good thing to pick up if you want. But again, just kind of depends on what you're looking for. I will say, on weeks where it's explosive, even with Searing Nightmare, this might be worth it to use just because you're going crazy with Death and Madness there. So that's kind of the big niche for this kind of Shadow Flame Prism Rift legendary. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. But definitely a solid pickup nonetheless. Okay, anything else we want to cover here? Not really. Cauterizing Shadows healing was buffed. It can crit. Again, I don't think you'd ever really use this as a Shadow Priest. Since refreshes don't give you healing, it's just a awkward legendary to use right now and just doesn't provide passive healing that we'd like. Probably not worth using or crafting. Okay, so let's kind of scroll in here past, again, this is not a PvP channel. If that wasn't obvious, I'm not going to cover these changes. I don't know enough to talk about them, so, there you go. So Torghast changes. This is something I think a lot of people might have actually just skipped over, but there are some really fun Torghast changes that I'm actually looking forward to trying out inside of Torghast. So we have some new anima powers, we have some buffs to old anima powers, and they've actually removed some as well. So we'll kind of go here in order. So first things first, we have a new power called Dark Technique. Enemies affected by Mind Bomb or Psychic Scream suffer 5% of your health in damage every second. Damage cannot actually break Psychic Scream or Mind Bomb. So this is actually very, very interesting. I'm actually in the process of updating the Icy Veins guides now. But they're like, with this power specifically, if you get one or two of these guys, you can actually start making like a little bit of a fear health build with this, right? Because again, this is 5% of your health. We have several powers that are increasing our health from like Power Word Fortitude or just the raw health powers that are then, again, just keep buffing this over and over and over again. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of play around with this. And again, that damage won't break Psychic Scream, so you don't need the fear resist breaking power to kind of pair with this. So very fun addition. We'll see how this works. That'll be kind of a fun thing to try out for. New anima power, Void Wraith Signet. So killing an enemy with Shadow or Death summons a Void Wraith Guardian for 1 minute that casts Void Flay, dealing 100% additional damage against enemies that are above 50% health. Wow, this is a lot. So a lot of questions with this guy. I didn't get a chance to test on a PTR, so we'll see what happens. But I think one of the most popular builds is getting the Shadow or Death powers and just kind of one-shotting everything with Shadow or Death. So you're already kind of doing this. So it'll be interesting to see if you can summon multiple Void Wraiths or if it's just the one at a time and you're just kind of refreshing its duration. Either way, sounds really fun, so we'll see what happens. Then we have Soul of an Archon. This is a rare power as well. Power Infusion now also increases all periodic damage and healing by 100%. Great. Awesome. Cool. This is, I mean, not super exciting by any means, but it's going to do a good chunk of damage, which is nice. Let's see. Cowl of Influence. You now control your character during mind control, but has a 30-second cooldown. I assume this works kind of like the dominant mind talent, but not totally sure. We'll see how this works, if it kind of just makes your thing a pet or whatever else it is. But we'll see. I've never been a big fan of the mind control powers, but it's there if you want to try it. Then we have Light Infused Egg. This is an uncommon power, so you should see it relatively often. Smite and Mind Flay have a 5% chance to grant you Power Infusion, which is pretty insane if you think about it. So if you pair up this power with the previous one where Power Infusion increases all periodic damage and healing, that's a fun thing. There's also the other one where Power Infusion, kind of makes Mind Blast have no cooldown, be instant cast. So pair that with this, and you're just going to be chucking out Mind Blasts everywhere, run Talbadars. Really, really a fun kind of Power Infusion build kind of sprouting out here, right? And then we have Fallen Priest Blessing. So casting Holy Fire or Mind Blast increases the damage of your next Devouring Plague by 30%. This effect stacks, but the duration is not refreshed. This is kind of a weird point. So again, this is kind of all playing into this kind of Mind Blast Power Infusion build. You get that Power Infusion thing, which kind of resets the CD of Mind Blast while it's active, and you're just building up to a massive Devouring Plague. Now, I don't quite know, again, the tooltip isn't very specific, if this is the dot damage and the instant cast part of Devouring Plague, or if it's both, or whatever else that is. And again, not quite sure of the duration either, but still kind of a fun power to try out. They also buff the Enduring Spirit power, which is, whatever. Vampiric Embrace now lasts 80% longer, up from 50%. Sure, fine, whatever. Let's see. Puppet Master's Strings can no longer be offered to the player unless Cowl of Influence is known. Which is a talent that we actually don't have access to. This is the mind control talent, so it looks like you actually need that talent for this guy. So we'll see how that works. But this should no longer pop up all the time if you're not already taking that talent, which is kind of interesting. So you have this Anima power, Cowl of Influence, so it's now tied to that specifically. So we'll see. It's gonna be kind of interesting, which is nice. I'm happy that you're not getting powered, because I almost never took this anyway. So, but if you want to go the mind control build, you'll still get this to pop up. They buffed the Earworm trait, which was from Mind Games, which is fine because all these were pretty terrible for the Venthyr. Mind Master's Hand Gloves now increase damage of Mind Games by 20%. It did used to just reduce the cast speed. This is going to be awesome. This thing's going to be so busted. It's going to do a ton of damage. It already does a lot, but there you go. Vandal's Zeal, they actually recently redesigned this, which is just like breaking the pots inside of Torghast just like stacks up your Mind Blast damage. I think up to like 30 or 40 times, times 3%. You can now get several of those powers before you could only ever get one. So that's going to be fun to stack up. Again, Mind Blast build, very relevant. This might be, this is slightly controversial. I'm very happy about this. So Psychic Wallet, Soul Sapper, and then Art of Phantasmal Healing have been removed. They are no longer powers you can select. Psychic Wallet, as I'm sure a lot of you guys might have played with, it lets you basically get like infinite Phantasma. You just mind control these mobs, and then you get like infinite Phantasma, and you can buy everything off the vendor. The problem is it made the runs incredibly slow. The runs literally took 15 years to complete, and I just never liked running with it. But it's removed now, so sad to say, but there you go. While an enemy is shackled by your power, or shackle undead, your power infusion's cooldown recovers 100% faster. I'm kind of like, this one's kind of wishy-washy. You know, I only took this every once in a while, but you know, there you go. It's gone now. Art of Phantasmal Healing. I don't remember exactly. I feel like this is the one where Shadowmen cost Phantasm, or like it buffs Shadowmen in some way. So again, a power I never really took that they're deleting. Generally speaking, fine with me. That means we're going to see more of the other ones that we want to see. This one actually kind of stinks in some ways. So Catharstic now properly triggers from Shadow Word Pain cast by Vampiric Touch through the Shadow talent Misery. This is mostly unfortunate, I guess I would say. This is, you know, obviously this kind of sounds like, oh, this is a bug fix. This is great. But before this change, when you're running Misery, it gave you a lot of control about when you popped the Catharstic damage. And now you don't have that control anymore, right? So actually, I wouldn't be surprised if you might see people just be like, oh, I'm just not going to take Misery now, or whatever else it is, right? Because if you can stack up Catharstic damage, get lots of these powers, you can do like large chunks of damage of the last boss of a wing. So anyways, it's a bug fix, but also, kind of meh, but again, there you go. So these are the Torghast changes, a lot more than I expected, to be honest with you, but there we go. Okay, and the last thing I want to kind of cover, I did kind of scroll past this, let's do this again, is the kind of Mythic Plus and item changes and all that good stuff, right? So you now have a currency called Valor, which is, again, they've had this in the game before. Effectively, what this does is allow you to target and then farm and upgrade Mythic Plus gear. This is going to be great for any of you guys that are still kind of struggling to kind of fill out your kind of haste mastery pieces, so use that to your advantage here. And then specifically, we can now get a better handle on the trinkets that we really want, specifically something like Soul Infused Ruby from Theater of Pain. You can farm the crap out of that guy, get your 220 Ruby that I'm sure a lot of you guys have been looking for in your vault. It is a great trinket. Same thing with Imperial Ordnance, or maybe even IQD. So having a way to kind of specifically farm those guys out is going to be nice. The only downside I want to keep in mind here, you can only upgrade things that dropped after the patch, right? So any of the gear that you currently have, you won't be able to upgrade, so you'll have to re-get those items starting next week, which, you know, frankly kind of stinks, but that's how it goes. So there you go. So there you go. There's also, you can get potency conduits in Castle Nathria now, which is nice. So for those of you guys that did not want to farm Stygia to kind of randomly upgrade them, get that nice upgrade to the Haunting Apparitions conduit, which will be really, really nice. And guys, that's really all we have for these changes. So again, nothing really kind of shaking up as far as our Covenant rankings. They kind of left that alone, thankfully. And as far as Sims go with the new Legendaries and all that, all those things are currently being worked on now. Depending on when this video goes up, they might be done. I'll have them linked down below anyways. You can check out the progress of those based on when this video goes up. And guys, that is it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll have future stuff coming out. I'm going to do a new video on Legendary rankings and all that good stuff, so stay tuned for that. And guys, before I end this video, big thanks to the patrons that are supporting me out on there. It really means a lot to me, guys. Thank you so much. And guys, this video would not be possible without that awesome support you guys are giving me, not only on Patreon, but on Twitter, on Discord, all the lovely messages. Thank you so much for all your support, guys, and we'll see you in the next video.